Last area is the last cultural factor is team working. This kind of feels like, we don't need to say much about this because we all know about team working and why it's important and it's really great, and the better the quality of team working in mental health, the better the outcomes for service users. So great, team working. The data we have from the National Staff Survey suggests to us about 40% of NHS staff work in real teams. That is, they're working in teams with clear objectives, where they work interdependently and where they regularly review their performance. Even if it's teams that just come together for a short time around a particular service user, those principles still need to apply. What are we trying to achieve? Who's responsible for what? Let's review how we did. And we estimate that 60% are working in pseudo teams. And the more people working in pseudo teams, the more errors, the more in the acute sector, the more deaths. We estimate, using the most conservative estimate and taking account of all other confounding factors, that in the acute sector, if we could increase the percentage of staff working in teams with clear objectives, interdependently, meeting regularly to review performance, that would be associated with the prevention of a minimum of 5,000 avoidable deaths annually. Team working is not just a nice to have, it's fundamental to the delivery of high quality care. And we've got a scale for measuring the effectiveness of mental health teams, by the way, that you may find useful, that was published last year. We know a little bit about what team working means. It means people working cohesively in trusting relationships and exercising personal discipline and making sacrifices for the good of a team. We know what a team really means. Basically, it's not some huge entity of 70 people. And we know something about what are the key elements for effective team working. I don't need to go through these because you'll be familiar with them. The challenge for us as leaders is making sure that we're leading teams effectively to create effective team working. That's about these kind of dimensions. Again, you'll be familiar with them. Don't need to go through them in depth. It's recognizing that chronic interpersonal conflicts in teams are a disaster for team performance. We all fall out from time to time. It's the chronic or intense stuff that does damage to team performance. So as a leadership community, we have to make clear that people must never let their interpersonal differences continue to get in the way of the team's functioning. And it's about building into team cooperation. My mother says this is a really fantastic book about team working. We began a program of research back in the early 90s because we saw that the teams that we were studying, breast cancer care teams, community mental health teams, primary care teams, were under often so much pressure. And so we asked the well, what happens if they stop? If they stop spinning the hamster wheel. And so we began a program of research, and we've done, I can't remember how many studies since then, maybe 20 or 30, and they've been replicated in many countries around the world, in Europe, in Australia, in Hong Kong, in the United States. Lots of replications showing that teams that take time out on a regular basis, even if it's at the end of a shift, just taking 10 minutes at the end of a shift to review, teams that take time out on a regular basis to say, what are we trying to achieve? How are we going about it? What do we need to change? Are much more productive and much more innovative than teams that don't. And a recent meta-analysis based on 49 published studies, combining the data from 49 published studies, showed that teams that did that were on average 25% more effective. So this is not about you giving permission to the people you work with to take time out. It's you requiring them to stop and slow down and learn and be smarter in how they function. The data are kind of unequivocal in demonstrating how effective this is. Kind of feels scary, doesn't it, to say, oh, well, we should stop. But actually, that's the road to improve productivity, along with things like clear goals. Any questions? So I've kind of rushed through that a little bit, but the work that we're doing with you on the team journey, I think Aston OD is doing it with you on the team journey. Aston OD is the organisation that was created from the work we did at Aston University, now owned by Skills for Care, is focused on the idea of team journeys and building the capacity within the organisation to develop teams. So training team coaches to work with teams to be clear about their identity, their objectives, their communication, their decision-making, their innovation, and so on. And some, just some ideas on how we create really outstanding teams, dream teams, inspiring visions, making team meetings really useful and positive. I think I said earlier, didn't I, that if you've got your team objectives, that's your agenda for your team meetings. If you have regular team meetings, there's your agenda. What else would you be talking about? And making those meetings really helpful. We've got great videos of team meetings, community mental health team meetings, primary care. We've got a video of a primary care team meeting where 20-odd people sit for an hour discussing whether to have a fish tank in the waiting area. But all of the data we have show that having any team meetings, no matter how bad, is better than not having them at all. Hey? Oh yeah, car parking. Or the other one we have a video of is where to have the Christmas party. Yeah. But the point is, when you bring 20 people for an hour together in a room, that's half a week's work. And we should be making sure that when we bring people together, that it's vibrant, dynamic, helpful. One of the things we do at NHS Improvement in the work I'm doing with them is at the end of every meeting, we have 10 minutes to say, how did that meeting go? 1 to 10. What was good? What do we need to improve for next time? Just doing that, 5 or 10 minutes in every meeting. Let's make sure that because it costs a fortune to run meetings and bring people together in this way. And they're not doing the other things they wish they were doing very often. So, yeah. Working through conflict. Inquiry versus advocacy. What that means is the most effective teams spend more time trying to understand each other's ideas and positions than pushing their own. So just watch in your team meetings, inquiry versus advocacy. It's fascinating. And our role as leaders is to model inter-team cooperation and organizational loyalty, not speaking negatively about other parts of the organization. If we've got an issue, go deal with it. Don't badmouth other parts of the organization. We go deal with it. Positively valuing diversity. We know that diversity is difficult in teams because when we're different from each other, it creates more possibility for conflict. But we know that diverse teams that function well are much more productive and innovative than teams that are more homogeneous. But it's dependent on everybody valuing difference in the team and being explicit about that. And practicing reflexivity, taking time out. So, and the last thing to say about team working is there's lots of talk about systems working across boundaries, and it's clearly enormously important for the delivery of the best possible care for our communities. I think we haven't begun to understand how difficult that is to achieve in practice. I've got my own job to do, my own part of the organization to run. Now you want me to go and work with these other sectors, these other agencies? I don't even know them. And I'm sure I don't trust them. So we're just beginning to understand. We published a document in the King's Fund last year called Leading Across the Health and Care System, where we drew from research literature around belonging and trust and intergroup contact and articulated these 5 dimensions. You can download these documents for free from the website, and that emphasizes this will only work if there's a heartfelt shared vision about transforming the services that we provide for the people of Leeds and surrounding areas like York and the county. A heartfelt shared vision. It will only work if we're setting long-term objectives, we're going to reduce the suicide rate by, I don't know, 50% by the year 2025. Because otherwise, if it's all just short-term focused, people say, oh, another initiative, system transformation partnerships. I'll just wait for it to go by and then, meanwhile carry on with my work. We have to set long-term objectives, and it does feel like system working is the only way forward. And the third is there has to be frequent face-to-face contact with the people that you need to work with across boundaries. Not meeting with some huge agenda and vast amounts of paper, or just emailing back and forth, but coming together face-to-face. The biggest failing of STPs so far has been the key people not meeting with each other face-to-face. We're animals, Trust is built through that close connection, that face-to-face connection. And we have to have systems for resolving conflicts openly, fairly, transparently, quickly. So I always suggest the Thomas Kilmann model as a simple one. It doesn't matter which model people use. But we need, I think, within our organizations and across organizations to have shared models of conflict management that we're all working to. So we can surface conflicts even before they arise and deal with them. And the fifth I mentioned earlier is the importance of always asking the question, how can we help you? How can my team help your team so that we're delivering high quality care for people in our community? How can our organization help your organization to ensure the system is effective? That's the first question, always. That's the first question. Unless we adopt those processes, I think it will always be difficult to work across boundaries. Make sense? You're being very patient. How are you doing? You okay? So, how to achieve all of this? I've kind of, we need to do more than just advocate to you to say, this is what you need to do. It's about leadership. So we have to have the leadership in place in our organizations that are focused on compassionate leadership, collective leadership, and these 5 areas I've talked about. So not only do we have to have leaders in place, we have to be ensuring we've got a pipeline of leaders coming through. It's no good having lots of interim leads and vacant posts and twisting people's arms. We have to have a pipeline of people coming through. That means, forgive me, but a leadership strategy. So I've been working with NHS Improvement, the improvement part of NHS Improvement, to design an approach which will help organizations get this in place. 3 stages. Let's look at our existing culture and leadership. Then let's design a process that gives us the leadership that we need in the future. So it's designed to be delivered internally. Everything we've produced is open source, it's evidence-based, and designed with a well-led framework in mind. The first phase is looking at our existing culture and leadership. The tools are all up online and you can download them. It uses patient experience, the views of the board, it surveys leadership behaviors within the organization, culture focus groups. It's managed by a change team within the organization so that people are drawn from across the organization to do this work. The second stage is designing the leadership strategy, and we have created a PDF, an interactive PDF on the website, which is free to download. I think you will find it, whether or not the organization as a whole uses this program, you will find a treasure trove of tools there to help you in your work as a leader. So there's something like 55 tools over 480 pages, but don't be afraid. You can just go in and pick and choose what's useful. So the 5 areas I've talked to you about today, there are tools for helping with each. So vision and values, values-based recruitment, values-based appraisal and performance, annual talent cycle. In relation to team working, it's recruiting for diverse teams, selection for team orientation, developing team leadership, team-based appraisals rather than individual manager appraisals, so teams are appraised on their performance and then team members appraise each other in terms of their functioning, and so on. And you can see the website address there. So it's possible to select out the tools that you need to fit your OD strategy and apply them. And it's meant to be done internally, so you don't need external people coming in to help you with this. And there are case studies that give you examples of where each of the tools has been applied. And there's a leadership, there's a community of practice. All of the tools, by the way, were developed in conjunction with East London Foundation Trust and Northumbria and Central Manchester, what was Central Manchester. But these are some of the organisations that are using them. And there's a community of practice as well. So it was a swift kind of journey through all of that. But please, there's lots of help there for your team working and team leadership training and so on. The last thing I want to say is to go back to what we began with. So, there are nearly 3,000 staff who work in this organisation. They form something like 1 in 20 of the local workforce. There are 1.5 million people who work in the NHS. That's 1 in 20 of the national workforce. If you add in social care, it's about 1 in 10. If all of those people come to work every day and experience compassionate leadership and compassionate cultures, they take that back out into their families and their communities. And all of the people who use your services as a trust every year, if they encounter compassionate care and their carers and their families, they take that back out into their families and communities. 1 million people make use of the NHS every 36 hours. If they experience compassionate care, they take that back out into our society at a time when we desperately need compassion, I think, within our society. So I think the potential is enormous of what you do. But you have to begin, I think, with your resilience and your capacity to offer compassionate leadership. That means looking after yourself, spending time with those you love and who love you. You know about these 5 ways to well-being, being present, savoring the moment, exercise, continuing to learn, giving and helping. But it begins, I think, with self-compassion. In order for you to have the resilience and the capacity to be compassionate in your leadership, you have to, first of all, to be compassionate towards yourself. So paying attention to myself, understanding the challenges I face in my life and in my work, empathizing with myself, caring for myself, and then taking intelligent action to help myself in order that I can be who I'm capable of being and stay close to the core values that give our lives meaning, like compassion, and enable us to have deeper and more authentic and more productive and more compassionate relationships with not just those we lead, but everybody that we interact with. So thank you very much for the privilege of talking with you today, and I'm delighted to answer questions if there's some time. For me, innovation is the development of any new and improved way of doing something. Yeah, and that can be something I've seen in another organization that I bring into our organization. We could do that in our meetings. We could get people to maybe begin meetings by talking about the most positive moment in the last 24 hours. That worked really well in that meeting I was in. Let's try that. So something small or something very large. How do we deal with this in the context of high regulation? Well, I've talked a bit about collective leadership and how we as a leadership community must encourage everybody to see that they have leadership responsibility, to create shared leadership in teams, to practice that interdependent leadership and to have a consistent leadership style. But most fundamentally, I think it's about modeling those compassionate leadership behaviors. when we listen to people, and we truly listen to people, then we begin to identify the challenges that they face, and we begin to understand the challenges, and we help them do so too. And our role, I think, is to then seek to answer, how can we serve or how can we support? And through those conversations and that dialogue, which may well be, how can I enable them to solve the problem for themselves and give them the sense that they have the freedom to do that. But also, I think, as I said earlier, by building really effective team working. Because for me, the best barometer of a team's effectiveness is the extent to which it's innovating, coming up with ideas for new and improved ways of doing things. You want to know how well your team is working, how much innovation is going on. Because that's what teams, they should be fountains of innovation. We bring people together with different backgrounds and skills and experience. If they're working well, there should be a lot of creativity and innovation. I saw the engagement score from 2016, so I haven't seen the new data and how it's gone. You haven't got it yet. So in 2016, your engagement scores had improved. There were some areas where things were not so good. Team working was one. There's a lot of work to do around improving team working. And what I say is, sometimes, even if you were in the top 20% for team working, I'd say that ain't so impressive. Given that the quality of team working in the NHS is generally so poor, actually there's a lot we can do to improve team working and into team working. And also, you're very good on improving the percentage of people who've had appraisals. Well, actually, what we know is that what really matters is the quality of the appraisals. So, with good appraisals, engagement goes up. If people say the appraisal conversation wasn't helpful, engagement goes down. So it's great to increase coverage. I think it's important, but that's not the issue. It's making sure those are really helpful conversations for people, so they can do their jobs better, they feel valued and respected. So there's lots good in the staff survey from 2016, but also, obviously, key areas for development. I've come to the end of my allotted time slot, so I would just like to say I feel hugely privileged to have had this time to share these ideas with you this afternoon. So thank you, Angela, again, and thank you for listening. Thank you.